That video is, of course, incredibly disturbing. The DHS Secretary, Kristi Noem, has called what the woman in the car did domestic terrorism. Do you think that's what we saw in that video?
Well, it's one angle of the video. I don't agree with Kristi Noem on this situation. And I think it's important to recognize that sending a huge number of ICE agents into communities, rounding people up who are not criminals, who are not dangerous people, drug dealers, gang members, you create an environment where things like this, can happen. It's a situation that's very unsettling for people. I looked at the video. I think it's going to be very important to get other angles on the video and have a real investigation. And the use of deadly force by a police officer is a big decision. And there needs to be an investigation. And if it turns out that this officer used that in a circumstance that they should not have, there needs to be accountability. The other thing I wonder is, with all the number of people that ICE is currently hiring, what kind of training are these individuals get? Are they ready to do this? Both my parents were police officers. My father once had to fire his gun in the line of duty. My mom had been shot at. It's challenging for any cop. But cops that are not well trained, you could wind up, I'm not saying that's the situation here, but this is the kind of thing that can happen.
When you talk about that training, we were just talking with John Miller, who of course worked with the NYPD, worked with the LAPD, and he pointed out that the guidance for those law enforcement officers is, if you're in a situation like that, back away from the car, right? And he was pointing to the video and saying, would it be possible for this person to back away? Is that something that, if you're extraordinarily well trained as a police officer, would be an instinct that you might have to hand that wouldn't exist if you didn't have such training?
Well, if you got a question about airplanes and flying in combat, I am your guy.
Well, maybe your parents talk to you about
my parents, they might be would have been good.
But you've also been through a lot of training yourself. You know the difference between something you can do on instinct because you've been trained and something that you don't know how to do
immediately. But here's also another thing I know is it's when things are happening very quickly, you got to make a quick decision. Sometimes things go wrong. And I am really concerned about what Kristi Noem, DHS, has done in these communities by sending dozens, hundreds of people in there, going after people in their community who are no threat to society. Yeah. That's created the kind of environment where these mistakes, maybe this was a mistake, maybe it wasn't. I think the investigation is going to have to determine, was this officer at fault, or maybe was this officer correct in doing what they did? But I think DHS really needs to consider, and the president should, is this the right approach? This is not what he ran on. He said he was going to be removing, gang members and criminals and felons from our communities. ICE is going after just like regular people, moms, folks who are obviously, they're undocumented, but they're no threat to society.
Your colleague in the Senate, Chris Murphy, posted on X today that Democrats can't vote for a DHS budget that doesn't restrain the growing lawlessness of this agency. And he, of course, was referring to ICE. Do you think he's right about this?
About us voting for a DHS budget? So DHS's budget is, out of control.
That doesn't restrain
That doesn't
ICE.
restrain. I would like to see, ICE not repeat what is going on in Minneapolis and other cities. There is some indication right now the next city that they're going to, I think it's fair to say, target is Phoenix, Arizona, where my constituents live. I am seriously concerned about them going in there and terrorizing communities and that don't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit our country to remove somebody like, I'll give you an example, Kelly Yu, who is still sitting in an ICE detention center in Florence, Arizona, who I visited, who's a business owner, who has 70 employees. She's got a deportation order despite being here for 20 years. She's never committed any crime. Yes, she's undocumented, but she has a kid who's a U.S. citizen, a husband who's a U.S. citizen, mom's a U.S. citizen, sister's a U.S. citizen. How does it benefit us by kicking out a woman who has created, a beneficial thing for our economy? She has 70 employees. Doesn't make any sense.
The mayor of Minneapolis in the press conference today said his message to ICE was to get the F out
Yeah, I saw that.
of Minneapolis. Do you think that's the right message? I mean, would you say that if they came to Phoenix and
Hey,
something like this happened?
one of a member of his community is dead. We don't know much about that person, but we certainly will find out more. I understand his frustration.
Let's talk a little bit about Venezuela, which I know is something that you, of course, have been involved and briefed on. And you heard from national security officials in the Trump administration on Capitol Hill today. Are you convinced that what the Trump administration did to Nicolas Maduro was a legal operation?
There was an indictment, and there was a bounty on him, and he's clearly a bad guy. Murderous, dictator, illegitimate, not the elected leader of Venezuela. And I think it's good that he's gone and he'll face the U.S. justice system. I kind of wonder what's going to happen to him, by the way, longer term, because Donald Trump pardoned Juan Hernandez, who's basically the same kind of guy. And what were those circumstances? I mean, why did Juan Hernandez get pardoned? So I'm concerned about that. But should it be the policy of the United States to go in and remove people, regime change? By the way, his number 2 person, this is like it being in the Navy squadron and the CO leaves and the executive officer fleets up, is what we call it. That's what happened. So we still have somebody, can we do anything here? But what is their plan? If you saw what happened in Iraq, like initially, this seemed like a good thing when Saddam Hussein was overthrown. And then it resulted in chaos. And we wound up being bogged down there for years. Hundreds, thousands of Americans lost their lives over that conflict because there wasn't a good plan. I don't see a good plan here.